It's always hot in Las Vegas, and with it being so hot, there's no way it could snow. And why would you build a city in the middle of a desert? There's no water there. Well, that's not exactly true. Today we are breaking down the top 5 weather myths when it comes to weather in Las Vegas. Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas Weather. I'm Meteorologist Sam Argier. You've reached the channel that talks all things Las Vegas and all things weather. And when it comes to weather in Las Vegas, I really think there's some misconceptions that some people think about the weather here. So today, we're going to clear those up. So let's break down the top 5 weather myths when it comes to weather in Las Vegas. Myth number 1, it's always hot. No doubt about it. It gets hot in Las Vegas. We average 70 days at or above 100 degrees. It's not uncommon to see a week straight of temperatures at or above 110. And the hottest temperature on record in Las Vegas, 117 degrees. That's been hit 4 times, most recently in 2017. Now, even though it does get hot in Las Vegas for a lot of the year, it also gets very cold. We're talking cold enough weather to break out those sweaters.
Oh, sweater weather.
Sweater weather.
Sweater weather.
Oh, God, I would.
Finally, sweater weather.
That's right, we are talking about sweater weather. Let me throw this temperature out at you. 8 degrees. 8 degrees. That is the lowest temperature on record in Las Vegas. That temperature was reached in 1963. And as you can imagine, the city looked a lot different then. The population was only 123,000 people. Today, more than 2 million people live in the Las Vegas Valley. As the valley has grown, more people living in the valley will change the climate. And that's known as the urban heat island effect. When more people are living here, there's more buildings, more roads, more concrete. And all of that absorbs the sun's heat, and then it will re-emit it during the nighttime hours. So that keeps temperatures up a bit during the early morning when we typically see the coldest temperatures of the day. So let's look more recently. Let's say the past 10 years. The coldest temperature has been 23 degrees, and that was back in 2013. It really varies how many days we see at or below freezing in Las Vegas. That would be 32 degrees or below. For some years, like 2013, we've seen as many as 19 days at or below freezing. But then you look at a year like 2017, we stayed above 32 degrees the entire winter. If you average out the past 10 years, Las Vegas sees 7 days at or below 32 degrees during a year. Now, one thing to note is that the official temperature for Las Vegas is taken at McCarran International Airport, which is near the center of the city, just off the Strip. For a lot of neighborhoods that are on the outskirts of the center of the city, as Las Vegas has grown, we've built out toward the mountains. A lot of times those neighborhoods can get a lot colder. Many times dipping into the 20s, and even on some of the coldest nights, we can see temperatures in the teens. If you're planning on visiting Las Vegas, you might be wondering, okay, when is the coldest time of the year? Well, that would be mid-December through January 1st. Between December 14th and January 1st, the average high temperature is 56 degrees, and the average low temperature is 38 degrees. Listen, if you're like this guy that goes to Chicago Bears football games without a shirt on, you might want to wear t-shirts and shorts to Las Vegas in the middle of the winter. And if that's you, no judgment. Wear them and wear it proudly. But if you're from other parts of the country, let's say California, along the coast of California, it typically gets colder in Las Vegas than the California coast during the wintertime. So that may catch some people off guard. So just keep in mind, during the wintertime, it can get quite chilly in the Las Vegas Valley. If you are enjoying this video, I'd really appreciate it if you rain down on that like button. And don't be afraid to roll the dice. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and that way you can keep up to date with videos like this and you won't miss any of my weekly weather updates. All right, on to myth number 2, but it's a dry heat. Yes, it's a dry heat, but when it's 109 degrees outside, it still feels really, really hot. So what is a dry heat? Well, a dry heat is simply this. It's hot weather with very little moisture or what's called water vapor in the atmosphere. And the 2 ways we measure that moisture in the air are through relative humidity, that's a percentage, and the dew point temperature. The lower those numbers are, the drier the air is. This is a weather observation from McCarran Airport on August 1st at 1:56 p.m. The air temperature was 110 degrees. The dew point was -9 degrees, so that gave us a relative humidity of only 1%. That is bone dry air. And check out the wind gusts. Wind gusts were at 26 miles per hour. So it pretty much felt like a blow dryer outside that day. Why is it that people think a dry heat is so much easier to deal with than when it's humid or muggy outside? Well, there is science to back it up, and it really comes down to how our bodies cool off. Our bodies cool off through the evaporation of sweat. When it's hot outside, we sweat. When the air is dry outside, that sweat can evaporate more quickly, and evaporation is actually a cooling process, so it helps our body cool off. You compare that to when it's humid outside, it's a lot harder for that sweat to evaporate, so it makes it much harder for us to cool off. If you live in Florida, or if you've been to the Gulf Coast or even the East Coast of the US, you'll often hear about the heat index. What that does is it takes into account the actual air temperature and the humidity value. And a lot of times when it's humid outside, the heat index can be much higher than the actual air temperature. Now, even though a dry heat can help us cool off a little more efficiently, it does have its drawbacks in that it evaporates a lot of moisture, which can lead to dehydration. And dehydration can be sped up quite a bit with alcohol consumption. And yes, when people visit Las Vegas, they tend to indulge in 1, 2, or maybe 10 alcoholic beverages. So, the next time you're sitting poolside having your favorite cocktail in Las Vegas, just remember to split it up with some water in between. You'll be thanking yourself later. But it's not always a dry heat. We can see humidity in Las Vegas, and prime time for that is during the summer. During July, August, and September, we see something called the summer monsoon. What that is, it's a reversal of the wind. The wind will come in more out of the south. That will bring in higher humidity levels, making it feel a bit sticky outside. So while we're known for a dry heat, it isn't always a dry heat, and during the summertime, we can get some humid weather at times. The summer monsoon actually leads us to myth number 3. It doesn't rain in the desert. While it doesn't rain a lot in the desert compared to other parts of the country, when it does rain, it can look like this. That is flash flooding from a thunderstorm, something Las Vegas can see during monsoon season. As we talked about, we get more moisture in at times during the summertime, and when you combine that with the very hot weather we will see thunderstorms develop. And sometimes those thunderstorms can be very strong, sometimes dropping more than an inch of rain in about a half hour. And when you have that much water falling that quickly in the desert, it can lead to runoff and flash flooding. Even though we do see rain in the summertime with thunderstorms, that's not the wettest time of the year on average. It's actually the winter season, with February being our wettest month. Las Vegas averages 3/4 of an inch of rain during the month of February, and when you look at annual rainfall, the Las Vegas Valley averages 4.19 inches. Now, that's not a lot of rain at all. Let's compare it to some other parts of the country. Let's go to Los Angeles. LA averages 14.93 inches of rain a year. That's more than 3 times the amount of rainfall. They see that in downtown LA. How about New York City? New York City's Central Park averages nearly 50 inches of rain a year. So when you look at those numbers, it's easy to see why Las Vegas is a desert and why Las Vegas is the driest major metropolitan city in the United States. Myth number 4. You can't get snow in the desert. Yes, you can. Check out this picture of the Las Vegas sign. This is back in February 2019, the last significant snowfall in Las Vegas. Around the Las Vegas Strip, we averaged between about a half inch and an inch of snow with that event. But other parts of the Las Vegas Valley saw a lot more snow. This is from the far west Las Vegas Valley in a neighborhood called Summerlin. Now, some areas of Summerlin are the highest elevations in the Las Vegas Valley, and some of those spots saw about 8 inches of snow with that storm. Overall, it's really tough for Las Vegas to get snow, and here's why. We're really good at being dry and cold during the wintertime, but when we see storms move in off the Pacific Ocean, they're usually too warm to bring snow all the way down to the Las Vegas Valley floor. Now, just about every year in Las Vegas, we'll see a rain-snow mix for parts of the valley, especially those neighborhoods like Summerlin across the West Valley that are higher in elevation. But in terms of getting measurable snowfall around the Las Vegas Strip, we see that about 2 to 3 times every 10 years. So it's really not a common sight, but when it does snow in Las Vegas, it's definitely a big weather story. Myth number 5, building a city in the middle of a desert? There is no water. Listen, I get it. When you drive into Las Vegas or you're flying into Las Vegas, there's a lot of open desert surrounding the Las Vegas Valley. So one might think, why would a city be built here? Well, Las Vegas has always been a lot closer to water than it may appear. When you translate the name Las Vegas from Spanish, it means the meadows. The next time you're walking down the Las Vegas Strip, think about this. About 1,000 feet below the surface is a naturally occurring aquifer. That's how we got the name the Meadows. We can thank the Spring Mountains. That's the large mountain range that runs along the west side of the Las Vegas Valley. When rain and snow fall over the Spring Mountains, it recharges the groundwater supply and fills that aquifer. And what's really interesting is that up until the early 1970s, Las Vegas was only on well water, only tapping that water in the aquifer. But as the valley grew through the 80s, 90s, and even into the 2000s, well, most of our water had to come from Lake Mead. Lake Mead is a man-made lake just east of the Las Vegas Valley. It's a reservoir, and many states across the West draw water from Lake Mead. Let's talk about how we use water. Now, if you brush your teeth or take a shower or wash dishes, all that water that goes down the drain is treated and it's sent back to Lake Mead. The biggest usage of water is landscaping and irrigation. So about 20 years ago, the Southern Nevada Water Authority paid people to take out the grass in front of their homes. And that actually has resulted in saving millions and millions of gallons of water that otherwise would have been lost to landscaping and irrigation. Since we're talking about water, we have to mention the Bellagio fountains. Definitely the most popular water feature in all of Las Vegas. It draws millions of tourists, and rightfully so. It's really an awesome show. If you're coming out to Las Vegas, you'll want to check it out. But the next time you look at that lake in front of the Bellagio, think about this. That water is not coming from Lake Mead. It's actually coming from the aquifer we talked about. Yes, there are wells up and down the Las Vegas Strip that tap that aquifer. Here's how it works. Where the Bellagio sits is the former site of the Dunes Hotel and Casino. It was built in the 1950s, and back then, water rights were given to different resorts. As properties change hands, those water rights carry over, so the Bellagio is able to tap that water and use it on its property. And speaking of the dunes and the Bellagio, I want to take a quick break. I want to take a quick implosion break. That is the Dunes implosion from 1993, and that is the implosion that really set things in motion for Las Vegas. Several more properties would be imploded over the 90s and into the 2000s, and of course that property made way for the Bellagio today. So when it comes to water in Las Vegas, yes, it's in the middle of the Mojave Desert, but there is water nearby, and conservation efforts have really come a long way in the last 20 to 30 years as we live within the means of the desert. So there you have it. Hopefully we cleared up a few misconceptions when it comes to Las Vegas weather. If you enjoyed this video, again, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like. And again, roll the dice on that subscribe button, hit it, turn on notifications. That way you won't miss future videos like this one or the weekly weather updates I post. Thank you so much for tuning into Las Vegas weather. I'm meteorologist Sam Argier. I'll see you next time here on the channel.